Keep watching to find out how to make Eggnog the Elf. In this video, Martyn Smith will show you just how easy it is to create this delightful design as part of Sweet Pea's Keeping It Simple sew-along. Let's dive in and get started.
We're going to make the base for the elf cone. We've made the other segments by following the instructions in the notes. Very, very easy to do, but the base is slightly different. We're stitching our batting onto our stabilizer. Then we're stitching another small rectangular window in the middle of our batting. We're going to remove the hoop and go back to our work surface, and then trim our batting back to our perimeter stitching line 1 to 2 millimeters away from the stitching. Then we're going to trim the batting out from the window on the inside. Now you can trim through all layers if you wish, go right through and trim the stabilizer out as well. I generally tend not to, but it's not wrong to do so. Okay, so I'm trimming the batting out from that window without trimming the stabilizer. But if you do, it does not matter. It has to be trimmed at the end of this block anyway. I just like the extra tension on the stabilizer for doing these things. Doesn't have to be neat and neaty tidy, but it does need to be trimmed out. So now we're going to do our placement line for our first piece of fabric. So the base section, we have 2 sections of fabric rather than just one. We're going to place our first section about 1/4 inch over the perimeter stitching line that we've stitched down. It needs to cover that square hole that we've actually cut out. So there's a gap that's been left there. We place the second piece of fabric face down, so right sides together, and just stitch the top and bottom sections to leave a split in the seam. And then we're going to do the flip and fold technique and stitch around the perimeter to get our square block for the base. That gap that we have in that middle seam is how we're going to pull our work through when we've completed the project. Okay, so now we want to, before we do too much more, we want to actually do our stippling or our quilting on each panel. Then remove from the hoop, trim our seams back to 1/2 inch, and then here's me going to trim that stabilizer out from the back of that square. Just be careful you don't trim your fabric. Okay, so there's that little hole. That'll be hand stitched up at the end, but that's what we'll be taking the project through once we've completed it. Now with our layout, so we have our base panel. So we have our elf's face with the feet attached and ears attached. And then the next 2 panels we've got, they look matching, but their little arms need to be folded forward. So the arms and hands need to be forward facing the elf face. So we've got 4 panels which will make our project, and those 4 panels will be attached to the square base. But let's first make our cone first. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's join our first sections, our first panel seam, so it's right sides together. And with a pin or a clip, mark our positions. Now we've got continuous lines coming through this project, so they need to match. Point on point. And satin stitch on satin stitch. Sew down theirs, making sure that you back tack both start and end. And there we have a continuous flow of our pattern. That seam will eventually be pressed open. So we need to add our next section. Our next section will be our face and ears section. I put a clip on those feet so as they held them together, so we got no chance of sewing them. And we're going to do the same thing, matching points on points on points, start and finish, and the continuous satin stitches that are coming through. Make sure his ears sticking out. And then the next section as well. Okay, so there's his ears are sticking out. So cute. Lightly press and then give it a burst of steam. Very important that our lines do follow through, because they are an important element of this design. Then we do our last seam in exactly the same way. We want to press that seam open once that seam has been created. It's like a teepee. So we just want to trim some of the bulk out of the seams. And so I'm just cutting on an angle. I'm not cutting to the point, I'm cutting away from the point. Right, so there we have. So that's enough. Don't over trim, because when we poke through, we're going to make a hole, which we don't want. Now, we need to attach our base. Doesn't matter whether your pull through hole is horizontal or vertical, it does not matter. So we want to go corner onto corner. We've only stitched those long seams on the cone, and we've stopped short at the seam allowance where it finishes. So as that perimeter stitching line, we stopped short on those seams so as that it allows us to actually sew the seam very easily from point to point, from pivot to pivot. If you continue those seams all the way through, then you wouldn't be able to do this. So you can see where those are opened up, those have been stitched to that last section. And then we want to make sure our point is on our point. Try not to bleed everywhere, I just stuck a pin in my finger. And we're stitching in between the two rows of stitching off the bottom of one of the front panels. Now we're stitching to the net, so we're starting and stopping on that seam allowance where we finish. We're starting and stopping at that point, no further. no less. So we're reversing on both the beginning and the end. So there we have, those seams are free at the end, and that will allow us to turn we have a point there, put a pin on our point, reverse, you can go one stitch over, but no more. Okay, just check to see that we've got our seams right. Turn again, and again, starting from that point on the seam. We're not going into the seam allowance. Reverse. On our last seam, so there's no pinning to be done because we've got to stop where we started. And stop. Right. Now let's just trim off our corners. You can see where that seam is open. Don't trim too close. The rule of thumb is you only trim as close as the length of your stitch. But I think for these projects is 2 times the length of your stitch. Okay, so there's our corners trimmed off. We can't get into press any further because we have the base on it, and so now we're going to be pulling our work through. Just be patient. As you see, I'm not. Just be patient, it will come through. It's a very small gap, but it really has to be. Sorry for the stops, I'm taking photographs for your notes as well while doing this. He's such a cute little guy, I want him as a doorstop. Look at him. So he's been pushed out with a pink thing and a chopstick, and he's had his seams slightly steamed and his ears opened, and then we're going to stuff them full of fill. And I sort of slightly overstuffed him too because I want him to be quite chunky. I probably would, in my situation, I'll probably put a plastic bag in there and put some grain or little beads or what have you in there to actually make them heavy. May even have put a sandbag inside him, but and it seemed like there was plenty of stuffing, so I'm going to stuff even more in. And you got to tuck it out into the corners. It's a brutal life being an elf. Right. Trying to poke the fill up into the point there. It was easier to use my thumbs in the end. I was going to use a tool of some sort. Right, there we go. Oh, actually, I'm going to make a pom-pom. Just around the bottom of a reel of thread. use the bobbin for the inside. It's not very much centered. It needs to be really centered. Cut one out. I think I made my last pom-pom when I was 5 or something, so this is dredging the memory. Yeah, got the better of me. Is that centre? No, it's not. I'm not a very patient crafter, so now you can take a little wedge out of there. It doesn't have to be a full circle. Now we do a second circle, so as we can actually then put a string in between the two layers when we cut the pom-pom to actually tie it off. You can imagine what I'm doing. I'm trying to cut that circle out ever so easily, ever so gently, but right. Here we go. We've got 2 circles and they should be the same size. They should have the same centres, hopefully. Rough enough. Now I've taken a little wedge out because you do not need it to be closed fully. Okay, so I've got a 4 thread of yarn. It's about an arm's length. Finally got it together, sorry. It's not one of my... Try and keep it as flat as possible. Because if you have too much bulk, you'll get a lopsided looking pom-pom. Just using up the yarn here, really. One more, that's enough. Cut that off. Right. Then we want to go in between those 2 pieces of card with the point of the scissors and trim the pom-pom open without losing it. Then we need to thread. I've just used the 4 thread, it doesn't matter. Put that in between the 2 layers. Tie a knot really tight. And there we have sort of a pom-pom. It could have had more yarn in it probably. There, you probably make a much better job of it than me, but there he goes. Just going to attach him by hand. Okay, and cross his legs, and we sew the little gap up in the bottom of it.
Well, that's a wrap. A huge thank you to Martyn Smith for a fantastic tutorial. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channels for more creative projects and tutorials. To shop the sewing supplies Martyn used in this project, visit swpea.com. While you're there, you'll find even more inspiring designs to spark your Christmas creativity. Good luck with your Keep It Simple sew-along entries. We truly can't wait to see your Eggnog the Elf. Happy stitching, and I hope to see you next time.